Hello guys, welcome back to Mallikarjun channel. This is Mallikarjun. Right, so this is going to be our second debate challenge session. Uh, as we discussed earlier, you are always feel free to ask any questions, any queries, and then do post your questions at my uh, blog, and then we can try to answer all your questions. Right, let's get started with the today's debate challenge 2. Uh, Before I just get started with the today's challenge, we will just recap on the last uh, session, whatever the challenge I gave you. For a 4-node rack databases to run and operational on all 4 nodes, how many ASM instances are needed? So I got answer mixed and pretty much like, somebody said not necessarily all 4 need to be running, and somebody said all 4 instances need to be running. We have something called Flex ASM in starting with 19C. That's one of the brilliant feature. If you install your clusterware in Flex mode, you no need to start your ASM instance on all 4 nodes. If you are suppose having 4 node of rack clusterware, you just start your ASM instance on any one node. That's more than enough. And you can start your database instances on all 4 nodes, but you can start your ASM instance on any one node. Uh, just to show you a quick demo, I have node 1 and node 2. I have a 2-node rack cluster here. And if I do on node 1, ps-ef grep smon, I don't have my ASM instance here. Like, I have Vara 19C, CDB1, rack 12C1, Vara prod 1, and single. So I don't have ASM instance, but still my database instance are running here. If I go to second node, ps-ef grep smon, you can see my ASM instance 2 is running here, whereas my ASM instance 1 is not running here. And then still my instances are up and running on this node 1. How it is possible? There's something called in uh, starting with 12C, we have something called a Flex ASM. Flex ASM is the one which is responsible for handling communication between both the nodes, both the instance communication with help of only one instance. So uh, if I want to verify whether it is a Flex ASM is enabled or not, you can just pretty much run this crctl get cluster mode. That's the one which will tell you whether this cluster is running in Flex mode or not. You can go ahead and do some research on Flex mode in Oracle documents. Flex mode is nothing but you can start any one ASM instance. You can see ASM instance 2 is running here. This ASM2 instance can manage my other instances which are running under this particular node 1. That's pretty much answer for that first debate challenge. And the second debate challenge was in case of if you have multiple rack databases are running on ASM, then how many ASM maybe background processes are needed to support my rack databases? Right. So as we've seen, each of these databases has its own individual ASMMB background process, and this ASM instance also has its own ASMMB background process. We need only one ASMMB background process. That's more than enough to handle all other rack databases. Each of these rack databases has its own ASMMB background process, and our ASM instance also has one ASMMB background process. So that's more than enough. I no need to have, like, if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 databases, I no need to have 5 ASMMB background process for my ASM. Only one ASMMB background process for my ASM is more than enough to handle all my rack instances. That's a answer to that second question. And the third question, can I have a higher patch level in RDBMS than your ASM? For example, your ASM is Jan 2021 patch and your RDBMS is in October 2021 patch. Yes, patch level mismatch is okay. You can have a higher level patch in RDBMS and lower level patch in your ASM. That's supported. Can I have a higher level patch? Yes, you can have a higher patch level for your database and lower patch level for your ASM, but it's not recommended and it's not a best practice. Again, it's just say that it's not a recommended and not best practice, but you can go ahead and you can have a higher level of patch in your database and lower level of patch in your ASM, which will work absolutely fine, no issue at all. So, but it's not a recommended or it's not a best practice, right? But only thing is, as I explained in our debate challenge 1, your database or the ASM Oracle version considering the version, your ASM should be higher version or your database should be equal to your ASM or lower version of your database. For example, 19C ASM, and you can have your 19C database, or 18C or 12C. You can have equal or lower version of your database. But coming to patch, you can have your database as a higher level patch and your ASM as lower level patch. That is supported. Right, so those are the answer for our debate challenge 1. Let's get started with our debate challenge 2. Today's question. I got a question from somebody saying that uh, I'm doing an update query, and then that particular update query is part of one block which has a 5 rows. For example, I'm doing an employee table and update a salary equal to certain, increasing the salary for 2 rows, where it is affecting for the 2 rows. What about the other 3 rows, which is part of that single block? You can see, like, I have a single block, which that block contains a 5 rows of records: employee number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and updating a salary for employee number 1 and 2. But what about the other 3 employees, employee number 3, 4, 5, which is part of the same block? Will that get locked or not? So to answer to that question, you have to understand the locking mechanism at your ASM, at your database level. This is the Oracle MOS note which talks about the locking mechanism. We have something called the table level lock, row level lock, and row exclusive lock, and so many other locking mechanism. And if you understand those locking mechanism, and then probably that itself will answer for your query. Let's see here what exactly it says. Go back here, this particular MOS node, and you can see select queries, what kind of locks you are getting. And in my case, it's the update table you are doing. And then mode of a table lock is your RX, row exclusive lock. And then whatever the rows you are going to access, whatever the rows you are going to update, only those rows are getting locked, and other 3 rows are still able to access. Other rows of a table are still able to access, and there is nothing called a blocking at your uh, a block level. Update will put a lock, row level exclusive lock, uh, at the row level, not at the block level. And only rows which are getting modified will be locked, and other rows will be uh, not locked and can be able to access for the further update or further access. Right. So that's a answer to that question. Uh, the update query will process if one block has 5 rows where 2 rows has updated, and what about the other 3 rows? Like, other 3 rows will not get any lock, and those will be allowed to further modification, and somebody can do any update statement or select statement. Anybody can do anything on that 3 rows. Whatever update statement is doing those 2 rows, only those rows will be locked, and only those modified data will be reflected, until the lock will be held until you do commit operation on that particular rows. Even though that single block has 10 rows, 5 rows, doesn't matter. Only the rows which are getting modified will be getting under lock. Right. Moving ahead to the next question. Somebody is doing a select star from table, select star from employee, and how it is going to access my SGA. Right. So basically the question is, select query, how it is going to fetch the data. The question is the other ways. I'm doing a select of a table or select inside my database. How that select query is going to be executed at my database level. So I just try to put down in a word manner here. There are 2 cases: case 1, case 2. Considering case 1, any select query, first it will go under parsing. So I'm not going to explain what is parsing, how parsing is going to work, like semantic check, syntax check, and privilege check, and all those things. It's a part of my parsing. I can go ahead, and I strongly recommend to go ahead and check for what is parsing, how it's going to work. I can just read through that. Any select query you do, it will first go for a parsing, and then once the parsing is done, the execution plan will be formed, execution plan will be created, and your server process, whatever user connected, he has its own server process. Your server process is responsible for executing that parse statement, that whatever the parse statement of that execution plan is responsible for executing that parsed statement and fetch the results from your data files. And once the results are fetched from your data files, first it will gonna write it to your database buffer cache. Once it write it to your database buffer cache, and then later it will be displayed to the end user who are gonna run this particular query. That's a very first case when you run that select star from employee table for the first time. And what happened in second case? The same query ran it again by somebody or from the same user, second time execution. The second time, if the same query is executed again, then it will not go for a parsing. Rather, directly it will go for execution because it's already parsed and the parse representation of execution plan is already formed here. If the same query is ran it again, it will directly go for execution rather than parsing because parsing is done already in case one. And then your server process will read data directly from your buffer cache because in the case one, already data is written into your buffer cache. Your server process will directly read data from your buffer cache since the results are already available in your buffer cache. After reading a buffer cache, result will be displayed to the user. And this is technically, we can call it as a cache hit. Cache hit. Somebody will ask in the interview question, what is cache hit? Cache hit, nothing but any queries get the results from directly from buffer cache. It's called cache hit because the data is already available in buffer cache. In case if the data is not available in buffer cache, then the process repeats. Your server process will fetch the data from data file and write it to your buffer cache and then display it back to the user. That's a normal whatever happens here in this first case. The same thing is going to happen here because your buffer cache is very small and frequently it is getting flushed, right? So if the result is available, directly it will get it from buffer cache. If it is not available, it will go to your data file, it will fetch the result and it will display it to the user. Right. These are the typical scenarios what happens for any select queries. You do it at your database level. Right. So I hope that answers for your query. Going to the next question. How many DB writer and log writer I can have it in my database? I think it's a pretty straightforward and simple answer. If you have understood the database architecture and basics of your database, you can pretty much answer this one. But again, uh, just to tell you, you can say for log writer it says LGWR, but your DB writer you cannot say DBWR. Instead of R, you're gonna put it a small n. So that n indicates it's a number, like it can be like 1, 2, 3, 4. That itself will tell you can have a multiple DB writer. But for the log writer, you do not have any suffix or prefix. So it means you have only one log writer. So ideally, straightforward answer for this question is you can have your multiple DB writer, but you cannot have multiple log writer. Log writer will be always only one because we know always log writer is very fast in nature and log writer will do a log switch very frequently. So we no need to have multiple log writer. Rather, we know our DB writer is a lazy writer. DB writer will not write frequently. It will write it only during certain times. And because of that, we may get some performance impact. So to avoid that, we may have sometime multiple DB writers. So just to give some more brief detail about that, you can just read to here. Yes, we can have multiple DB writer, but not the log writer. Log writer is always one. DB writer, you can have multiple DB writer. You can see we can have a DB writer from DBW0 to DBW9, 0 to 9, 10 DB writer here, and then start with again DBWA, A to Z. So you can have your A to Z DB writers. So these are like multiple DB writer. You can put it to your suffix or prefix here. And then at the database level, you can do select PID, PName, username, program, trace files, and from VDALR process where PName like DBW percentage, you will get it how many DB writer you have it at your database. So just to check it here in one of my lab, let me see. Right, so let me connect here one of my database. Right, so if I query this one, pretty much I can see this is my PID and this is my DBW0. I have only one DB writer here. If I have multiple DB writer, I might have seen like SPID and then multiple SPID and multiple DB writer names. Right now I have only one DB writer, so you can have it if you have multiple DB writer. You can be found out here. Right, so log writer we will not be having multiplex log writer. We have only one log writer at any cost because log writer is very fast in nature and it used to right? It used to flush that buffer log buffer cache to your log files very frequently, like for every 3 seconds, 1/3 is full, or whenever log switch happens, whenever commit happens. So your log writer is very faster in nature. So that's why we don't prefer to have multiple log writers. Right. So going to the next question, uh, you want to find out how many users are defined in your password file and what are the privileges associated to those users, and how do you accomplish this one. Okay, first of all, like the question seems to be valid, but um, I would like to go for the basics first here. Like you are saying password file. First of all, you need to understand what is password file and why we need a password file, and then how many users, how many maximum users I can accomplish in my password file. All those things. But straightforward, coming back to your question, how to find how many users are defined in my password file. Again, I already executed certain queries on that. There's something called pw file underscore users. So you can always query this pw file underscore users, which is a database level, which is a VDLR dynamic performance view. You can query this particular view and you can find it out which how many users are part of your password file. So you can just do select username sysdb. These are your username and these are the privileges associated with that particular user. Sysdb, syssuper, asm, sysasm, sysbackup, sysdg, and syskm. All those, like whatever these privileges, you can see it here. So if I query this particular select query here, right, so you can see, right, I have sys user and I have test2, test3, and test4. All of these users are uh, part of my passport file. So if I do I have something called user, like I have test2, test3, and test4. I have one user called test1. Let me grant sys dba2 uh, test1. Right, so you can see, right, grant sys dba to test1. I given a sys dba privilege to test1, and if I can query this particular password file user now, you can see, right, test1 also is part of your password file. So whatever the user who is granted with your sys dba privilege will be part of your password file. And if you revoke sys dba privilege from any of these users, that will be removed from your password file user. For example, I have test2 user, I can do revoke sys dba from test2. So I'm going to remove that uh, sys dba privilege from test2, and okay, revoke sys dba from test2, right? Sorry, there's a typo here. Sys dba from test2, right? So revoke succeeded, and now you can query the same statement. Your test2 will be out of that password file user list. You can see test3 is there, test4 is there, test1 is there, test2 is out of that. And you can do the same revoke for test3, and you can same do the revoke for, sorry, revoke for your test3 and test2. I can do it for test3, I can do it for test4. And now you can query same command, and you don't see that those users are not having uh, not part of your password file. You can see now test1 and this is the only two users part of your password file. Only this password file underscore user is the one which will give you list of sysdba privileged users who can manage, who can log into your database as a sysdba and then manage your databases. Right, so that's a pretty straightforward. Regularly, you need to manage your sysdba privileged users. Most of the time in your production database, you will not be having a sysdba privileges to any other user except your sys user. Sys user is a master user for your database who will be predefined granted with your sysdba privileges, but none of the other user will be granted with your sysdba privileges in any of the industry in as a industry best practices. But this is the dynamic performance view. We will password file underscore users, which will give you how many users having a sysdba privileges to manage your database. Right, so that's the answer to that question. How you want to find out how many users are defined in a password file. So if you query your pw file underscore users, that will tell you how many users are defined in your password file. Right, and then what are the privileges of those users are having? So you can pretty much you can get it this particular uh, PW password file underscore users, PW file underscore users. You can see what are the privileges they have. They have sysdba, sysoper, sysasm, backup, dgks, and these are the privileges they will be having. Everything you can manage it using your PW file underscore users. Right. So that's pretty much I took these 4 questions for today's session, and there is an interesting topic now. This is a time for me to provide some challenges to you guys, and I can try to post your queries or try to provide your answers in this video section. In the video description, I can try to provide you the answer in our next debate challenge. So questions are. I just explained how select statement works in database, and with comparison with that, I want to do update employee table. Employee is a table name. Set salary equal to 2000, where employee ID equal to 123. I have an employee called employee ID 123. I'm gonna increase his salary from 1000 to 2000. How this particular update statement will work at my database, how this update query works, and how it will access my HGA. I just explained about how the select query works. It's a challenge for you guys to answer to this question, how this update statement works in my Oracle, right? So the next question is, we just explained how many users are part of my password file, how I can manage them, what are the privileges are available. Everything I can check it out using PW file underscore users. And now the question is, what is the use case of your password file other than remote admin operation? So why we need the password file? We all know like we have to create a password file in order to connect to your database remotely and do some admin operations. And then that's one of the use case. And what are the other use cases? Why basically why I need the password file at my database level? If I don't have my password file, what happens? So just try to put your comments here for these questions, and definitely I'll try to answer in my next debate challenge. What's the use case, why we need, and what happens if I don't have my password file, if I have my password file, and then what are the different use cases in case of disaster recovery, in case of DR setup. Everything I'm gonna answer it in my next debate challenge, uh, and I'm hoping everyone to uh, answer your comment our answers in my video comment section, and definitely I'm gonna update you back what definitely I'm gonna respond you back with my comments. And then again, if you don't know, this is a new DBA initiative. Ask your questions. It will be like opened last week. You can go back to my blog, Malik034 Blogspot, and you can participate in DBA challenge. You can always do submit your question. Just click your ask questions, and then you can submit your whatever questions, whatever query you have it. Just click on that, and you can just ask whatever question you have it. Right, just go and then click ask questions, and then uh, you can submit your questions. Question number 1, question number 2, and submit. And if you have a further question, again repeat it. Again, resubmit your questions with the same name, same email ID, and you can ask for n number of questions. We can take it on every uh, every Friday and every Monday. You can see as per this particular description here, this debate challenge is gonna happen on uh, every Friday and Monday at 5 p.m. IST. So I'm gonna take it all the questions, and I'm trying to answer all your questions. And at the end of that question and answer, I'm gonna give you this kind of challenges, and then you can participate on this debate challenge, and we can uh, we can answer back to that particular whatever the challenge I'm going to give you today. In our next session, I'm going to recap those debate challenges. I'm going to try to answer those questions, and then I'll pick up new set of questions from you guys. Right. So that's it for the today's session. We'll catch up in next session. Thank you guys. Bye bye.